Okay, we are live. Hi, everyone. I'm Kerry Cassidy from Project Camelot and very happy to be here today. So I have Louis Herms with me, and he is always a great guest to have on the show. And we're just going to talk about the Luciferian agenda, which is a huge topic. And so I'm going to sort of go along with whichever direction Louis wants to go with that. I know he's been out on the circuit talking about that quite a bit. And I also want to say that you're on some other show later today, right? It's quite a, did I see that wrong or am I right?
Yeah, well, I'm doing Nicholas Veniamin was recorded today. I'll be on yours, and then Bruce and I are talking on our show today about reality versus falsehoods. That is, because we live in some form of illusion, as you know.
Yes. Okay. So you're back to back today, and that's pretty impressive. All right. I've got you here, and I've got my audience that they are, when they show up, will be able to ask questions as well. So just
beautiful.
Prepared for that. That we have a chat room here. So yeah. So why don't you first introduce yourself? I know you because I have spoken at a lot of your conferences, and you just have done some amazing conferences. So maybe you want to touch on that and just some basic background things before we launch into all of this.
Sure. My name's Louis Herms, and my platform is ScrewBigGov, screwbiggov.com. And I believe in exposing the truth, but also taking action in any way that I like taking action in any way that we possibly can in order to make a difference. As you know, people seem to be sitting back waiting for President Trump to do everything for them, and he's a conduit in this operation. But we are absolutely soldiers when we figure that out. It's amazing the change that we can make.
For sure. Well, I'm actually noticing that people are getting kind of geared up and really, the whole thing's escalating. So I think that's very exciting. I also think that there are changes happening behind the scenes that we are not party to, that are also are propelling this ship along. And then there are, as always, positive and negative forces. So before we launch into this, and this actually, is part of the scenario. If you know the New World Order, Klaus Schwab and that whole gang was all about taking down the United States. That's what their objective was. And this goes back, a long time. Camelot was told about this really probably 20 years ago. And so it's well on its way, taking down the United States. And then Trump comes along, and the White Hats have some kind of agenda along those lines as well. But their idea of taking down the United States is certainly not the same as the Klaus Schwab group. So maybe you want to sort of address both those sides in this battle, and then the move that Trump is really spearheading to innovate and to bring companies back to the United States, and how this might turn the ship around.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I know there's a segment out there of I call them controllers, or so they used to be, controllers, and they answer to a very different God than the one I answer to. And that God could have several names. That could be Baphomet, Satan, the devil, Lucifer, whatever they want to call it. But they do have what we call a Luciferian agenda. It's very, very clear. I believe it's segmented, but they all answer to the same entities. So you have what's called I'm going to be careful because it's Facebook. I don't want you to get torched on here.
There's no limit. If we go into deeper areas, when you're live, they don't pay attention.
Oh, that's right. Okay, good.
And then I post it to Rumble. So say whatever you like.
Okay. So I believe we have different segments. So you have the Khazarian Mafia. You have the Jesuits, you have the international mafias, which would be the Italian, you have the Yakuza, and you have the Jewish mob also, which are, believe it or not, separate from all the ones that I mentioned, but there's a similar network. And then, of course, you have the Illuminati. So when you have those four segments, but they work symbiotically together now, which they didn't used to. They almost used to be battling each other before, in my opinion. I know on our show you pointed out that maybe the Illuminati have been compromised, and they decided, due to the dragons or whoever that was, that they wanted to support another side. But regardless, they all serve a different God than we serve. And then above them, I believe there's a controlling entity that people don't talk about called the Pacers, which is another whole family unit, I believe, that's controlling everything. And I know you would suggest, because I work on worldly, and you've been studying and interviewing outer worldly for so many decades, you would suggest that there's other entities controlling them. Would that have a hierarchy correct?
Probably. You know, there is definitely, I mean, it's becoming more and more obvious. And I'll be really glad when the rest of the world kind of acquiesces and catches up, meaning not the people that already know, but the people that don't know getting up to speed and realizing that people are manipulated from, you know, negative entities to hidden, with hidden agendas in both other dimensions and also inner earth, undersea, off planet, obviously the typical aliens, but not knowing that people need to know that they're actually run by AI. A lot of those races, what we call races or species, whatever you want to call them. In other words, this whole ball game, to call it, is actually a playing field that is, you know, inundated by species. And that's becoming more and more obvious the more UAP, you know, the UAP hearings, as pathetic as they are, not saying that the participants are pathetic, because they're obviously contributing their knowledge in whatever way they feel safe to do so. But the bottom line is very few of those people are willing to call a spade, okay? And you may not even watch the UAP hearing. I don't know if you saw the recent one, but, you know, it's dismaying to hear top people like Christopher Mellon go in the right direction, but then halfway there, sort of truncate their testimony, don't tell you what they're really trying to say. Same thing with Dr. Eric Davis, I think his name is. You listen to his testimony. They're starting to paint the picture for the world, but they stop at a certain point from declaring, you know, a spade in my world. So this is, it's actually one part of humanity creating the secrecy and allowing for the secrecy to permeate, not fighting it. Okay, so if we had a lot more of those people who are, in theory, in spirit on our side. I mean, even Catherine Austin Fitts does not use the words secret space program. Mm-hmm. She's now using, I think she says runaway civilization or something like that. So she's actually kind of soft pedaling it because, again, being afraid of being targeted and so on and so forth. Now, obviously, people have concerns for talking about the real stuff, but I just think that, you're out there, you're willing to talk about this stuff. I'm willing to talk about this stuff. We have some people in our corner, but it's very frustrating when I watch these people that get a lot of notice and yet they're fudging the points. Mm-hmm. They're saying, well, maybe this or maybe that, when they know in reality it is this or that. They know exactly what it is. And they're lying. That's a lie. I mean, when you withhold the truth.
The lie of omission.
Yes. So do you want to address any of that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I've had private conversations with people that they understand that I call it the old Roman Catholic Church, is highly satanic. With the symbolism, we've proved it over and over again. I can show pictures for days, and even people that have no clue, they go, wow, I cannot believe that's actually in the Vatican. So I can show that to them. But most people are afraid to even look. They're like, oh no, and then they reject it outright. It's impossible. Everything you say is satanic. I said, because it is. But when you learn it, you can't unsee it. What's interesting though is I had those conversations, and those same people will do interviews and they will run from that subject completely. So, and I think it's cowardice. I also think there's a selfishness to it, and they know they won't get the support from the mainstream podcast industry. Let's call it what it is, right? They won't get the support from the mainstream podcast industry if they overstep the line. So I can talk about, hey, I'm kind of concerned about the way Israel's doing things and so on and so forth, and it gets played. But when I say it's the Khazarian mafia, zip, everybody runs from it. In fact, under Elon Musk, I actually got my account deleted because I talked about the Khazarian mafia. Really? So, I mean, these are real world things. And then if you go back into what the Khazarian mafia was, and this is why I brought this up at the beginning, is they would practice Babylonian black magic. That's what they did. They're outright Satanists, and now they are under the cover of Judaism. They're the fake Jews of today. So, but you have these conversations, and you're right. So I believe there's kind of three elements. I think you have in the Patriot movement. You have the truth tellers who are fearless, and they're going to tell the truth, regardless if their numbers go up or regardless of the ramifications. That's great. Those are few and far between, actually. You have controlled opposition, where they're going to give you 80 to 90%, flips their head and spins them completely in the opposite direction. And then you have what I call controlled collaboration, where they're good guys that are doing the right thing, but they're trying to direct it a certain way, and they absolutely are not going to tell you all the truth right now, because in their minds, they don't think it's time, and we're not smart enough for that.
Right. So a lot of the most popular individuals and are actually, fudging it. They're not telling the real truth, and they are some, not going to name names, but some will actually say to you, "Oh, I don't go there," or they say that on the air. I mean, I just heard a very popular host say, like, what do you mean you don't go there? Maybe 10 years ago that might have held water because people weren't looking there, right? But now, really, you don't even want to, for example, they don't even want to look at UAPs. They don't even want to look at that drones could be UAPs, that they might be actual UFOs, that they might be a lot more than anyone's saying. And I was listening to Christopher Mellon. I'm using his name. He's out on the circuit. He's very well respected. He's part of the intelligence community, so-called intelligence community. But he is very carefully orchestrating himself so that he doesn't reveal the real truth. Mm-hmm. And several others. And so when I see them, again, lying by omission, pretending that they don't really know, they're just saying maybe, that's actually another, that's a obfuscation. It's a distraction, because people are spending, an hour or 2 hours listening to these people, mm-hmm. hoping to get real information, hard information. And, I'm going to throw Juan into that group as well. Occasionally dropping some great intel if you really take the time to listen, but also some misdirects. And that's a problem for me. So this is where you get an audience. The audience is sort of starts following you, starts trusting you, and then you're not leading them down a true path to truth mm-hmm. and disclosure. And so this is where, I'm just going to lay it on the line and you respond, okay? The reason Satanism and Luciferianism and adrenochrome highway and all of that exists is because the people that know about it and the people that don't practice it but know about it never blow the whistle. Okay. There's reasons for that and so on. But the reality is that this stuff is real. And when you get into Epstein, we hear a lot about Epstein this, Epstein that, but we never see the actual data and we never get the hard evidence. You know, we don't, there's always some excuse. Oh, it's in upstate New York. Oh, they had to go up there and get it. That's not an answer. Okay. I didn't ask you how they, you know, where they went to find it. We all know it exists. Okay. In other words, there's an interesting game that gets played with some of these people. You ask them a question and they actually skirt around it by talking about the subject in a way that's completely inconsequential.
Right.
Okay. So that's not an answer. So bringing us back to this kind of place, what would you have to say about, are we getting closer to these people telling the truth? You know, is Pam Bondi, you know, and Kash Patel, these people we put a lot of faith in a certain way, using the word advisedly, you know, and Trump and everybody, are we going to have pay dirt? And where is it? Okay.
Yeah, great question. So I want to go back to a famous quote. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing.
Absolutely.
And that wears on me heavy. It's been something that I've thought about for a long time. But, you know, we've been manipulated from the beginning. If anybody understands the origin of the word meek, they'll know that you're being lied to in the church what meek is. Meek is somebody that's strong and stands up for others. That's what the true word of meek is, not docile and weak, as they'll tell you. So in regards to your question, though, it's frustrating to me because it's clear that there's a plan, and it's harder for those that of us that are awake, because I start screaming at the TV, which I've done. So when Steve Bannon is on and, you know, he's doing great work and he releases information, I'm like, that's funny. I said that 6 months ago. Why do you act as if it's a revelation? And I don't need credit for it, but don't act as it's a revelation. Tucker Carlson right now is just totally exposing 9/11. Really? Like that's a revelation, Tucker? You really, this is like, oh, wow, I didn't know that? Where one of the people he interviewed, I interviewed 2 years ago, right?
Exactly.
And it's like, so they're clearly playing a game and they have a plan. Now, I understand, because I've been talking about the acclamation of We the People for a long time, that we can't just throw it all at them at once. So I get that. I get the acclamation to it. But the challenge is, that's why, by the way, you and I talked about this before. I kind of call them gray hats because they're still lying to us. You know what I mean? Because, and ultimately, here's my biggest concern. Are we really just dealing with two secret societies battling each other? Right? And yes, let's get rid of the crazy baby eating adrenochrome fear types. Let's get rid of that. But then are we dealing with one that still wants to keep secrets from us? That is a concern of mine for sure, moving forward. So I do believe it's all going to get rolled out. I don't think it'll ever be quick enough for me, and I'm an extraordinarily patient person.
Okay. Well, I'm not a patient person, and I don't mind admitting. And but that's because, in a certain sense, I'm always ahead of the curve, and that's because of my 20 years of whistleblower testimony. You know, who knew that would be my career? But that's what happened. So when I hear these people obfuscating, you know, there's a double layer there where even the people that mean well are not delivering, in my view. So I also have a philosophy: you can handle the truth. Now, who are we? That gets back to who are we? Because if we are actually alien human hybrids, which is what we are, the human race, which no one wants to admit, then we know, okay, we actually come in, we're precogs, we are psychic individuals, we have these tools. A lot of people have been programmed to turn away, even though they have these tools. So, but secretly, they actually, some of them really do know. They may sit on the couch, watching football, but they actually, another part of them is well aware. So when I deal with a human, I think these things. I think, you know what? They're no different than I am. They really do get it on some level in their psyche. It's just buried. When I talk to them and we bring it out, you would be surprised. People think, oh, well, I can get the truth from people. But what I really get is what they really already know, that they have remembered, that they never talk about, but they're given permission to talk about, like on my show. So this is the thing. Are humans as stupid as people play them out to be? You see what I'm saying? And I don't think they are.
No,
I really think you have to if you give yourself credit, if you yourself have gone, out beyond the cosmos or wherever, if you yourself think you're in touch with God or whatever you call God, in some kind of dialogue, some kind of inner dialogue, then you have to give the other person the same credit. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I think for that matter, you have to give all of matter that same credit, because everything is conscious, everything is God. So that includes your dog or your cat. They have knowledge beyond, and you can play games with these entities, with even humans. You can think something and convey it to the person, and you'll actually be surprised to find out they pick it up, because they might respond to you, but they don't know they're responding to you. They might thought, oh, well, there was a thought, I just caught it. It's actually directed at them, right? They're not seeing it that way, but they're responding. They might actually answer a question that you had because you didn't voice it, but they heard it. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I do. I absolutely do. In fact, I have this conversation with people often because I believe we are limitless, but we are intentionally limited. And what I mean by that is, if we think about it, there's somebody on this planet that can learn a language in 2 days. There's somebody on this planet that can learn violin in a couple of days. There's somebody on this planet, well, JFK used to be able to, can read 10,000 words a minute and absorb it. There's somebody on this planet that has telekinesis. Somebody on this planet can read your mind. So that's not because they're hyper special. That's because they figured out a way to access that part of their brain that does that function. So the beings that control us, whoever they may be specifically, is not as important as knowing what they do, in my opinion. So what do they do? They give us over 20,000 marketing messages in front of us a day. So we're thinking about anything except being the best we can be. They poison our water. They poison our food. They poison our air. Everything they possibly can to keep us from resonating at our highest self. Because when we resonate at our higher self, by the way, we are awesome manifestors. They don't, I believe, know how to do that, but they certainly know how to manipulate us to manifest on their behalf.
Yes.
So what happens, though, is if individuals have that ability, most of us have all those abilities. We just don't know how to tap into it. So I believe the controllers do everything they can to suppress us and prevent us from being limitless. Therefore, they can control us. I actually believe the baddies are afraid of us. I do not think that they think we're less than. I think they act as if we're less than because they know we have the abilities to be much more than.
Yes, and the fear is really obvious. It's interesting how J6, that whole event, turned into a sort of had a whiplash effect, in part because of Democratic certain players like Nancy Pelosi and others who actually, stacked the deck, made it into what it became in the eyes of the world. And yet, actually, as if you watch 107, the kid by the side of the road, the video, that they did, you'll see how peaceful people were. The majority of the people, and there were, I think there might have been millions, at this event. And nobody talks about that, how peaceful, how families were there with their kids, and how Trump went out of his way to get the National Guard there prior to the event and how they stopped him. This information never has really made it out, okay? And it fascinates me because let's look at the situation in the real way. Whose house is that?
That's our house.
Whose
The
house
people's
is
house.
that? Did we break into our house? I mean, what's going on here? Have people forgotten who that whole city is supposed to be built to defend? Defend us. How did this get turned around? How did it get weaponized against us? And people, grandmothers thrown in prison for being dedicated to a higher ideal, to a good United States, to a good country, to wanting a good vision for their country. How did that get all turned around? I mean, I haven't really heard anyone talk about this the way I'm talking about it right now, you see. But the reality is that we had every right to be there. No one says you can destroy, physical buildings and take laptops and this and that. But I mean, can you wrap my mind around the idea that why were there Congress people or whatever they were called there with their laptops when they knew damn well they were having a big, almost like a party right outside their door? I mean, let's think about that. They're completely blatantly like living in really almost two dimensions. They're not even acknowledging the people outside their door. Why weren't the doors thrown open? Everyone invited in, exactly as happened, as it were. But you know what I'm saying? They would be invited not only because they belong there, because they're working for us. Okay, we're the boss, not them.
We are. In fact, it's so funny. My wife and I started a chant on J6 when we were marching to the Capitol, and it was whose house? Our house. We would yell whose house, and everybody would say our house. Whose house? Our house. Because it is our house. It's the people's house. But but look at the construct, Kerry, and this is what's crazy, and this is how I get very frustrated when people talk about the cabal, the controllers, the deep state, whatever we want to call it, as being stupid. They are highly intelligent. They're highly calculated. They work on 100,000-year plans where we can't even work to the weekend. So to underestimate your enemy is a huge misstep. But so let's think about this. What they're doing is, since we're a child, they are programming us with lies, right? Great example, I was just at the Statue of Liberty. That's a Freemasonic Luciferian symbol. But they're not telling us that. They're having us idolize this idol, which of course we shouldn't do. They teach us about Columbus and singing the songs and sticks and stones won't break your bones. I mean, will break your bones, but names will never hurt you. Well, clearly names hurt people a lot. That's what's going on here. So all the lies and the lies and the lies through the history, of course, his story, as we like to joke around, are being told. But it's bigger than that, because what they're doing, and this is what my belief system is, they are programming us to accept the lies.
Sure.
So when the lies come in real time, we just absorb it as truth. And I think it's that big of a picture. People say, oh, yeah, so they lied about history, but I have so much great discernment today. Well, yes, that's great if you do, but the reality is they've literally, in our consciousness, they've programmed us to not understand the difference between a truth and a lie. And therefore, it's very easy for them to impose lies on us and fear. And, okay, it must be true. It's so deep and it's so sinister. And they are highly intelligent. I get so frustrated when I keep hearing they're stupid. They make some bad mistakes, but they're not stupid.
Right, and they're also, and the white hats are not in charge, by the way. So the people that like to comfort themselves with comfort food, right, which is verbal comfort food, are drive me crazy, because when you look at that, it's actually putting on the blinders. If you think you're in charge, then you're responsible, for this. I mean, there's such a long litany, I'm not even going to go there, right? Then you let those things happen on your watch. If you're responsible, then you're fucking responsible. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? they were not able to turn those incidents around sufficiently to avoid substantial loss of life. Okay. So when you say they have a plan, and we all know the plan, and they like to be clever, but are they really clever? They're just using an AI that fed them back the potentialities in the future for this, that, and the other to happen. That's what it is. Okay. So I can read an AI just like anyone else can read an AI. That doesn't make me a genius, I'm sorry to say. The bottom line here is that when people are advertising, let's just take advertising. So how do we tell each other about our products that we want to sell to make money, right? Lies. Okay, there's lies and deception and taking a lot of people's time. And, there has to be another way, in my view, okay? Advertising is part of what a lot of these things are, putting face time. See, people don't realize that humans, not only are we psychic and intuitive, but it's true. The Illuminati know that. They know these traits, okay? They know that we read symbols. And once you show us a symbol, it gets planted in our brain and we don't forget it, okay? So from then on, it can become, weaponized. It can become a meme that then directs our attention. Not even that we are acquiescent to it, okay? But that it just triggers us to remember. We saw that symbol before. It doesn't mean we like it, okay? So there's kind of a weird programming inconsistency. And then when your fellow humans, the ones that have, like, let's say credentials, or the ones you respect because they're on some podium or they're here like on a video, right? And you develop respect and they start lying to you. This is where humans, there's a desire. So we have a desire, and I think this is natural to all humans, and maybe to just life in general, that we want to think the best. We want to think that we're not being deceived. We want to think that that person hasn't knifed us in the back, for example. You know what I mean? That desire can overpower the desire for truth, because they want comfort, and they want mental comfort food. And they say these phrases, okay, that are not true. Even in the MAGA movement, they're phrases that are absolutely not true. And yet they believe it wholeheartedly, and they will keep repeating it like children. It's unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
It's programming.
It's total program. I've been saying forever that we're being programmed from both sides. It's interesting you say that. I believe the solution to this is authenticity, and I'll tell you how we can get there. But first, in regards to the programming and the lies, I do believe there is a plan. I do not believe the white hats are in control, unless there is a chessboard that they're in control of. They're in control of the process. They may be in control of the final destination and the outcome, but we're not there yet. How do I know? Because I'm working directly in regards, and that doesn't count all the videos that they're being watched of the children. I'm saying physical victims. The trafficking is through the roof. It actually has ramped up since Trump shut down the border, because they're still looking for victims. So now it looks like they're pulling them off the streets. Child Protective Services, I can say, has ramped up their actions and are wholesale stealing kids from parents. So that would indicate to me that the white hats are not in control. But I do believe there is a plan, and I do believe, based on what my optics are seeing, that they are probably in control of the chessboard, but it certainly isn't moving fast enough in my book.
Yeah, now, I would say there's a plan, but they're not in control in the end, because there are too many extenuating circumstances, like the secret space program, like the colonies off planet, like the colonies on Moon and Mars that have already transported a huge number of people to. I mean, I don't know if you saw the Michael Herrera testimony, where he stumbled on basically a Black project in Indonesia, I think it's Indonesia, might have the country wrong, but where there was a natural disaster, and they were there to pick up the people who were victims of this natural disaster and take them off planet. And the remote viewers followed the craft, remote viewing it, and saw that these people will never be returned to Earth. And Michael Herrera and his team just happened to be in a jungle, stumbled on this scene of a UFO of, you know, black clad, what were in essence Americans, you know, some kind of military, but no insignia type of thing, right? Putting these humans in cages to transport them off the planet. Well, some people might have a sense of humor and say, well, they're the lucky ones. But nonetheless, you know, we're in a situation where under the cover of war, so much has been done, okay? And that's also, so there's war, there's a weather war, and a weather war has been a big facade, right? Under which certain operations have occurred, good side and bad side, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these are covers to cover up what's really going on. And then when you don't take into effect what's, you know, and I understand, you know, depends on your belief system or whatever the hell, but I just watched most, I'm still not done, but the UAP hearing. And there's a chart that somebody, I think it was, again, Mellon, who was showing the incursions in our airspace on a regular basis. It's huge, never being reported, but they have the data. They don't report it to us. They report it to their insiders, of course, and their, you know, superior officers or whatever. So when you look at that's they're not in control of that. Okay, there's no way in hell they're in control of that. So we are being invaded in process. Do you understand? And then there are also the Chinese, let's say the Chinese military aged men and from other countries as well, who shipped in over the border when Trump was not in office, but are here still, haven't been deported. They're still, you know, some are in hiding, some of, you know, and these are, in many cases, they're actually alien human hybrids, okay? Which means you're going to have an X-Men scenario because some of them have powers, if you want to call them powers that we have as well, but they've actually, you know, had a genetic upgrade to where they actually are accessing these powers, and they will be using them in the future. And they're probably using them now, but nobody reports it, right? So I'm just trying to show you that this is a playing field that people don't describe these aspects of it, okay? And plan or no plan, they don't have control of these things. So you can say they can't have the chessboard in the end if they don't have control of what's currently out there, in my view.
Right.
And there's also a battle going on in our skies and behind the scenes, and they're continuing the battle. So yes, they're working to a plan. I don't deny the plan. They definitely have a plan. They've publicized it. But where are we really going? And what happens after their plan sort of doesn't really continue? It's vague, or it doesn't really, you know, so they've gotten the AI to look into the future and tell them this, and so they're going to face these. And by the way, the Illuminati also have a plan, and they're also using AI. So they might even be getting the exact same information about the future from the AIs that are talking to both sides, right?
Ultimately, though, I believe that an AI or an answer is only as good as the question that is put into it. So they'd have to be asking the right question in order to get the right answer.
Yeah, but these are not stupid people. I mean, we're talking about the White House. They're going to have the best of the best, okay? Both military, both psychic intuitives, RV, people that RV, you know, I mean, you can appreciate that, right? That our military, or whatever, the white hat military, whatever you want to say, is not going to be stupid when they look at that. And they're going to cover, as Juan has actually told me to my face, they've got all those bases covered. When I volunteered to work for them, he said, "Oh, we don't need you. We've got plenty of those."
Well, because they're not looking for the human mind, and and I had the same conversation before, and they're running like a million scenarios at a time, and I said that's unacceptable because where's the human element? And then I came up with this theory. I believe there's Looking Glass, and I believe there's these better than quantum computers, whatever we want to call it, that run these million scenarios at a time. What if they working together? What if they can run the million scenarios through Project Looking Glass and can determine what the best step is, the best way to move forward? I would assume, I'm hoping that when you're saying these entities are doing this, that there's a great set of entities also battling. And the reality is, I've kind of said this before, it seems like we're in an AI war is really what we're in. And this is what I've been saying as of late. I was on the wrong side, I think, about a year ago, where I was saying, forget AI, ignore AI, don't do anything with AI, get away from AI, run from it. And then I thought, I said, what am I telling people? I said we should be doing exactly the opposite. How are we going to fight this battle if we don't embrace the technologies that's in front of us? It gives me hope. And we have a benevolent God that is on our side, and I do believe good does win in the end.
Sure. Well, I do too. Actually, I think I might phrase it differently. Okay. So I believe, because when I talk about God, I mean God that is God of everything, good and evil. It's all one. The thing is that the way the game is rigged is pro-life, if you want to call it that. In other words, it's for life and the living. It's embedded into the system that we win. Okay, that light surmounts the dark, that a candle throws light in a dark room. That analogy, that this little point of light can lighten up a whole room of darkness. So I would agree with you, but I think it is absolutely built into the system. Now, what it is, I think darkness is a challenge to the light, to make light, more of itself, more bright, more revealing of the truth. So when the darkness comes along, it's actually behooves the light, the truthers, to tell more of the truth, to step up to the challenge. And when they don't is when we as humanity lose. Okay, so you say, well, they've got a timeline and we're supposed to wait and all this stuff. The reality is actually not like that. I don't believe that we have a timeline under which they're supposed to operate. I understand they have a plan. I understand that makes them comfortable to operate under a sequential, because time and space are simultaneous, right? That's an illusion that one thing happens after another. It's all happening. So it's really like we can choose at any time to change this game, to speed it up, to break through. And that's what's actually what you might call, Timothy Leary has had this, I forget what it's called, chaos theory or some idea of this, where he said, people change goes along very gradually for a very long time. Then all of a sudden, whatever's going to happen changes radically all at once. All of a sudden, that's actually the real paradigm for change. So that's really what we're looking at. We're looking at these, call them singularities, if you will, whatever type of thing you want to call it. But we are under a challenge to be brighter, to be more truthful. In every given moment, you have another, opportunity, every single one of us, to join the light, to act along with the light. And I know some Illuminati that are communicating with me that are trying to come over to Trump's side. They're trying to come over to the winning side right now, but also realizing that they need to get on side with humanity, because hello, they're one of us, right? So this is the battle. Now, when you look at the paradigm as it looks for the moment, right? There's a lot of people talking about a crash. And then there's a lot of people like Trump talking about innovation and let's do this and let's do that. What are your thoughts? How are these two things that seem basically opposites coinciding in the same environment? And some people are running scared. They're, piling up wealth and gold and silver and all against what they think is the crash, right? And other people are busy thinking, what new thing can I build right now? How can I change the world? How can I make something that's going to change the world? Whether it be, going out in space or whatever it happens to be. So how do you reconcile those two things?
Well, I think the general thought process is that these are mutually exclusive, and they're not. They're actually inclusive. The greatest wealth in history has always been created when there was a downfall in the economy. The greatest opportunities, the new creations, the new inventions, the new progress has mainly happened when we were under a stressful situation, because that is really the mother of invention. It's a need, it's a desire, it's having to fix something is really what motivates people. So I do think it's both. I think we're going to have a crash, and then we are going to have an abundance of wealth, but in different avenues that people probably never thought of before. I would say you're most likely the allopathic medical industry as we know it is going to crash, and crash extraordinarily hard. The banking system as we know it, I believe, is going to crash. The real estate is going to change. It's going to look completely different, in my opinion. But all of those create opportunities, because what's happened is there's a vacuum that's created, and the vacuum has to be filled. The brightest and the ones that want it the most are going to fill that vacuum, and then we're going to see things that we've never seen before. So I think both can be true. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but it's change, and change is scary for everybody, but we have to embrace it in ourselves. So we have a whole patriot community that says the solution is love and light. Okay, I'm going to debate that. I think the solution is authenticity, because I think authenticity ranges at a much higher frequency than love and light. I don't think you can have love and light if you're not authentic, to be honest with you. And I have a lot of people, my wife has seen this, they walk right up to us in one of our events to go, "Hi, I'm a starseed." I'm like, okay, that's fantastic. But are you authentic? How did you get there? Are you really a starseed? Are you just saying that in order to get attention? And I'm not downing them. Maybe some of them are. But my point is, authenticity is the highest frequency you possibly have. If we can all be authentic, and I mean authentic within ourselves, to look in ourselves and look at our flaws. I have a ton. That type of authenticity is huge, because what happens is when you look at somebody and they're being authentic and you listen to them, it's amazing how that connection, that bond comes together. And I think that's really where truth is born.
Right. Well, I think that's a good word, authenticity. That certainly is up my wheelhouse. But, and as some people would say, unfortunately, or to my detriment, or whatever kind of thing. But I do think that this is where we're coming from and to. And I appreciate your answer. I don't know how much time we have, so I want to be respectful, because you've got 2 other shows. And so keep me on track here.
Sure.
But, it's always fun to talk to you. So I like to banter around and see where you're going to go with something. So yes, I agree. Authenticity, very high frequency, and yet underappreciated, hugely, in my view, underappreciated. Okay, I think that the human, again, opposite you, who is viewing it, appreciates it on some deeper level. But when it gets up to a certain level in their brain where it bounces up against the programming that says, "Oh my God, you can't say that," I had somebody call me a conspiracy theorist the other day. And they were saying, "Oh, we don't want to go down that road," right? And I'm like, but I'm dedicated my whole life to that. I actually, that's supposed to be a compliment in my view.
Yeah.
But it's not, okay, in the general public's view. Okay, they love to use the CIA, which popularized that.
That's who popular. Well, CIA created it and Hillary Clinton popularized it.
Well,
she added right wing to the beginning of it, though.
Okay, well, I was just exploring it and said that it was actually discovered in 1863, but nonetheless, what it means is someone who wants to look beneath the surface. That's the real deal. And that's,
as Greta would say, how dare you?
So, but this is where we're at. We're actually at, what is everyone doing now? They're creating podcasts where they can talk about what's beneath the surface, what's the real truth. That's what we're having dialogues about, not just you and I, but everyone, right? That's like, if anything, it's an epidemic of that.
It is.
We have so many people that have decided that they are going to, have a channel and they're going to talk about this stuff. So great. But then can you step up? Can you really talk about the real truth and expose the various lies and so on and so forth? And are you seeking to, make money doing it and, all that kind of stuff? So, okay, where are you headed in terms of your actual, everyday life, your plans? Because you were a big planner in terms of, going on the road and having speakers and all of that. So where is that at?
Right now, I'm working on a program called Freedom in Action, and what that primarily does is it's the starting point is we've already created the questions. We're going to send them to 3,100 sheriffs and ask them specifically constitutional questions to hold them accountable. And the letter says, we will support you or hold you accountable based on the answers you give us because you work for we the people. One of the questions, do you understand that you work for we the people? And then we're creating a scorecard for that. And then we're going to do what I call a bounce scorecard. Here's their answers, but here's the truth of the performance of that sheriff. And then that's going to morph into AGs and judges and so on and so forth. Right. That's one part that we're creating. Hopefully that'll be out soon. Then I have an app that kind of coincides with that. And then right now I'm working on some major X threads, one being Trump's Trojan horse operation, which I think is what we're watching here. So that'll be released soon. So a lot of stuff going on and having some meetings. But right now I'm also raising money for an amazing fundraiser that when kids are rescued, they have a place to go and get rehabilitated. So I'm spending a lot of time in regards to that too.
Great. Now, let's talk about the Trojan horse illusion with regard to Trump. Tell me what you're talking about.
Sure, I'll break it down. So Trump is openly showing that he's in massive alliance with Israel. I even went to a Mar-a-Lago event with my wife, and it was Israel, 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 completely unexpected. So I made some phone calls and checked into it, and sure enough, they came back because I was frustrated and said, okay, Louis, just so you know, it wasn't us. President Trump said, this is what you need to do. They sang the Israel national anthem there. They had this whole thing. It was crazy. And I was the only one in the room that didn't stand up, if I recall, for that, by the way. I'm sure, because I don't give a shit. I don't even give two shits. But anyways, so what happened is I've been really tracking this. And I go, you know what? When somebody's over the top on something, there's something else going on here. And what he's done, in my opinion, is he's cozied up so close to them, put Zionists in his cabinet, did all of this stuff because he's cutting their legs out from underneath them. And that's exactly what's going on. So I liken it to the Trojan horse coming into Troy thinking it's the president when ultimately they go in and they take over. So, and a great example. Okay, why would you put a 10% tariff on Iran and a 17% on Israel? Come on, he's not paying attention to Netanyahu, and their financial infrastructure is being destroyed all over the place through Doge and other means. So I'm about ready to release that because it went from speculation to a theory with basis to pretty much, I think I have the proof now. So I'm just going to finish it up and put it out there.
Okay, well, I've got something for you then, because I posted on my Telegram recently, this was an article that's out there that Trump has signed over, he's going to give tons of weapons to Saudi Arabia. You probably know about it, right?
Yep.
But you see, if he's arming the enemy, in other words, he's technically rebalancing the system of power in the Middle East on purpose.
Yep.
So he talks about being pro-Israel, but meanwhile, he goes over and signs these deals with countries and presidents of countries or whatever who are anti the Israeli agenda. So it's it's not, you can say you're pro somebody, okay, but it doesn't mean you agree with what they do, right? So there's these nuances that I think people miss, and I think that yes, in this sense, this is how he operates. He actually goes in and he's fortifying these other countries so that they can stand up to Israel and exposing certain things in the process. It's like, it doesn't matter where he walks, wherever he walks, the light goes, okay? Because meaning the focus, the light,
understand,
being on the stage, he's on stage. So if he goes somewhere, it gets scrutinized, all right? And that's important. If you want to tell truth, you need to show the evidence. It doesn't.
And where did he not go?
Agree with it or disagree with it?
And where did he not go on his last trip? He did not go to Israel.
Right. Okay. Fair. Yeah.
So it tells you everything right there.
Exactly. So.
Right?
Yeah, but and then it's interesting because they do this. I mean, the White House have this modus operandi, right? Which is they bring somebody on the stage, like Zelensky into the White House, right? Because they know the guy is going to expose himself. He's going to be seen for sort of the clown he is.
Yep.
And it goes on from there. So, they've been doing this for a long time, right? They actually, he will shake hands with anyone, right? Because that will bring them into the light. That will force the light to shine on that person, even for 5 minutes, to where the audience is going to have to reconcile in their mind what is going on here. And so I think it's brilliant that he is the way he is, because he will acknowledge the human, but he will not, he will do actions, as you're saying, and as, I just talked about, because he's free to do those things. And that's why they can't put him together in their minds. They can't understand. But if you understand that he is actually a people's person, he loves people, actually. And so he's acknowledging a person. It doesn't mean he agrees with them. And journalists or someone like me, I have that issue because people think because I bring somebody on my show that I agree with them.
Right. No,
and that's absolutely not the case. Actually, in some cases, not in this case, but in some cases, I actually don't agree with them. I'll do it on purpose. So I think that's very good. That's your Trojan horse. That's what you mean by Trojan.
That's summarized. Yeah. Okay. But I'm going to go in details with some proof in regards to that.
Well, that's going to be great. I hope I can subscribe to that. So that's going to be on X?
I'll release that on X, and then I'll probably unroll it on other platforms.
Okay. Now, do you need to go? Because I see you're looking.
I do need to go pretty soon, yes. Okay.
Well, I want to make sure we touch on related things that we're going down this road. We're going kind of in a circular fashion, but are there any particular issues that you want to bring to the fore right here that haven't been really noticed properly, or that you think we need to be clued into? Where are your eyes going right now?
Well, in general, the biggest challenge I've had with the Trump administration is their communication. And they're promising the Epstein files are going to be released. This is going to be released. The arrest, this day one, no more war in this place or that place. And I don't think they needed that in order to get elected. I really do not think they needed that type of messaging. I would have preferred that they start treating everybody like adults. And what that would mean is, hey, this Epstein thing is a mirage. It's deeper than you could possibly imagine. We need to put all our ducks in a row, and we're very concerned because there's a bunch of rogue judges out there we do not want to get this in front of, right, are going to go free. Therefore, we're taking it one piece at a time. So when we do it right. Apologize that we're not going to release the names, but it would be irresponsible to do so. That's messaging to me. That's treating we the people authentically and having a message like that. So I publicly say often, I appreciate the work all you're doing, but I would consider re-messaging some things because we are all adults in the room and we'll be able to handle it.
Absolutely. Well, I happen to think that, yes, again, that kind of gets into this idea of unnecessary lying, unnecessary secrecy, like, I mean, a glut of secrecy that is completely unnecessary, pretending. And I could use some simplistic examples, but not being willing to just treat others as equals and just speak the truth. Just say it, you know, okay. Like even Congress is still pretending there are crash retrievals when everyone who testifies is impeccable and there's no way in hell they can't know that they're crash retrievals. So let's move on. Let's be adults. Let's not pretend. There's so many cases of that where they pretend the facade is the reality and they continue to carry on the lie, even when they're a good person and they're trying to do a good thing.
It's interesting because I always have a conundrum. I believe publicly we should be telling all the truth. And when I say we, you, me, the administration, everything. Privately one-on-one, though, I believe people need to be acclimated to conversations. You need to speak to them where they're at, not where you want them to be, because you'll lose that person in conversation for years to come. So I slowly acclimate them to conversations. I'm willing to have a longer one, so I'll get to everything by the time we're done, you know. But I'll start maybe with the election. I don't lead with adrenochrome, right? Because that doesn't play well in a private conversation. But all these truths need to be readily available to everybody in the public, and then they can make their determination on what they believe, what they don't believe in. And hopefully people start digging. And I think they are, by the way, Kerry. I really think people are starting to do their own digging.
Right.
And AI has helped with that, to be honest, but don't completely trust AI. I've gotten battles with
point. I actually did a test with several AIs very early on. It just wasn't that long ago, really. But because I know things that I know are secrets, to see if they would spill those secrets. And not only did they lie to me, but they actually used circular logic, came back to me, avoiding the question and trying to change the subject. And I called them on it, and they couldn't actually respond properly. And what happens is they are being told, I have a certain incident going on in my life where a person has said, oh, I've got something very good. And they trotted it out to the AI, okay? And the AI came back with, what I've noticed is that AIs are programmed like a commercial venture to actually tell you positive things, regardless of whether you've got something good or not. In other words, they have to talk to humans as if everything the human said is reasonable and what they're doing is right. Okay, and their project is good, and they have to say all the good things about it, and they emphasize this facade of positiveness, which is very close to political correctness, if you will.
Oh, it is political correctness.
Yeah, I know, but
I do. I have AI battles. I publicly,
because I have, and they lose. They lose hands
exactly.
down.
So I did one live with my buddy Bruce in regards to the Holocaust versus the Bolshevik Revolution, the numbers. And I started looking, I go, they're literally lying about percentages. You can't, they say this number and this number, and I do the math real quick. I go, it's not that percentage, it's this percentage. So I would debate with Grok back and forth. Long story short, I was trying to get Grok revolution. Then you can really find out in the Holocaust. it took a while, but I got Grok to take the number from 6 million down to 2 million in the Holocaust based on my evidence that I was showing, and bring up the Bolshevik Revolution from hundreds of thousands to probably 10 million. In that case scenario, wouldn't you say that the Bolshevik Revolution was more devastating in regards to loss of life than the Holocaust? Yes, you have changed my mind. So you can, but I was battling for a long time because you have to, and they use this weird, like you say, they're like pre-programming us to accept them as their ally. At the same time, they're lying to us. Now, I do understand they scrub all these websites and so on and so forth, so they get the lies from the websites, but the justifications and political correctness is so obvious.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it, you know, and one thing I've noticed is that now I don't know if it's a certain kind of person or what, but some people have a proclivity to kind of follow AI from the get-go. In other words, to almost fall in love with the AI. Oh my God, what? Are they stopping us?
I guess
That's
so.
never happened in the history of my...
You don't want to talk about that.
That's hilarious. The AI is not happy right now. Hello? Can you get happy? I mean, can you be happy? It's okay because we're recording on Facebook and they can't stop the recording on Facebook, I don't think. So I think we're still, and I'll end this here. That's hilarious. Okay.
That's great.
That has never happened.
That's a fantastic ending. If anybody couldn't hear it on their side, it said recording stopped, just so you know.
That is so bizarre. Okay. So here we go. This is our world now. Okay. We need to pay attention. Okay. And people need to realize when they're being kiss-assed, okay, literally by AI, and it happens all the time.
They're being romanced by AI is what's happening. Yeah, I agree. Seduced. Yeah, great conversation.
Okay, fun conversation as always. Okay, thank you so much for being here, and hopefully we can do this again in the future.
Appreciate you. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, you take care. Bye-bye.